13. While Takuda continued to question Dakoto, Kendall Pesh left the circle and made his way over to the mercenaries. He had heard enough to grasp the great possibilities opening to him, all of them, and he needed to talk to Vost. By the time he got to his commander, however, he found that someone else had stolen his thunder. Except for one little bit of information, Michelle Guardine had already given most of the story to Vost. But the piece she'd missed was probably the most important of all.
"Think of it, Garber," said Pesht. "Just think of it. All this took place 500 years ago. They've been trapped here ever since. Just think of the weapons they have. Or don't have."
"We need to find out more," said Vost,
standing up and placing his hands on his hips. The pose made him look imperial. And he knew it. He gazed at the other members of the mercenary team, allowing the full impact of his commanding presence to register. The only one who didn't seem impressed was Holly Goodall. He'd have to be careful with her.
"Let's go see if we can pry some information out of that furry critter. And maybe even a decision out of Takuda. I know we can get the information, even if it means having to invite the little bugger to our camp for a heart-to-heart. But getting Takuda to do anything will be another matter."
The mercenaries surrounded the group of desk members who were talking with Dakota. Sean Arsenault, leader of the first desk section, looked across the circle and caught the eye of Johann Miranda. He blinked slowly and Miranda nodded. Not a big nod, just a slight creasing of the neck. Both men rose and stepped back through the ring of mercs. Vost and Seagroves pushed forward to take their places. Now the questioning of the Tatate began in earnest. Unfortunately, Dakota did not have much specific information about the human enclaves. He had been to them before, but only when very young. He'd gone to them with Dikaka on a mission from the tribe to the humans when the humans first came into the forest. There had been no resolution of the problem, and shortly after that the tribe had moved deeper into the forest. All Dakota's other information had come second or third hand from other Tatate, and the occasional human who had wandered too far into the forest. It was from those contacts that he had learned the language of the humans. The humans sent traders to the woods to search out various delicacies that grew there, and the Tatate had been glad to harvest them for the humans. Supplying these items seemed to keep the humans calm, and a calm human was much better than an angry one. According to Dakota, there were 3 inhabited human areas. There had been more in the beginning, but conflicts among them had reduced their number through attrition and amalgamation. The exact organization was beyond the aliens' understanding or knowledge. That they were 3 in number was all he could say for certain. Vost probed for more information about the settlements, or enclaves as the Tatate knew them. Each one, it seemed, was surrounded by an elaborate system of walls and ditches in various configurations. Great gates, normally barred at night, secured each settlement. Although there was general free access to the enclaves during the hours of daylight, there was no entry during the hours of darkness unless one had a special pass. Dakota did not know how to obtain such a pass. It was the state of the walls that intrigued Vost, but he was careful not to lead the alien with his questions. He wanted to be sure the answers given were the most accurate, not the ones he wanted to hear. It was usual in an interrogation, which this surely was, that the person being interrogated begins by telling the questioner what he wants to hear. With his most careful questioning, Vost drew out a picture of an elaborate defensive position designed to stop ground forces. But the forces they were designed to stop would have been primitive even 500 years ago. It was obvious that none of the humans had much in the way of powerful vehicles, though Dakota's limited knowledge provided no explanation for this fact. Meanwhile, Vost tried hard to keep his excitement under control. A plan was beginning to form in his mind, but he didn't want it to leak out too soon. Brian Seagroves was more blunt with his questions. Seagross was a pilot of the Phoenix Hawk Lamb, and he was frustrated at not being able to fly. Land air mechs were the ultimate fighting machine in the eyes of their pilot, and Seagroves fit the mold perfectly. There were two things that Seagroves liked that gave his life meaning, and one of them was flying. The sense of power he got from taking the Lamb into the air was more than he could describe or even admit. Sitting in the cockpit, the thruster controls under his hands, feeling the surge of power through the command seat, watching the ground flash by beneath the swept-back wings at 900 kilometers per hour, was almost sensual. Flying and wealth. Seagroves wanted to be rich, so rich he'd never again need to think about money. That was what drove the Lamb pilot.
But they don't even fly.
It was a question as well as a statement.
The humans don't fly. How can that be true? Everyone knows how to fly. It's the first thing we do.
Dakota looked at Seagroves in surprise. Of course they not. Bird fly, human on ground walk. The alien shook his head. Only bird fly. No others need fly. Seagroves leaped to his feet.
Get out the Lamb, he shouted. We can rule this world. That's enough, Seagroves, said Vos sternly. Just hold your jets for a while. We need to think about this.
If looks could kill, Vos would have been dead on the spot. Vos had been careful not to tip his hand, and now that this fool was going to blow the whole scheme.
But don't you see? Don't you see? They don't know how to fly.
Seagroves was almost dancing with excitement.
We can have it all. Seagroves, sit down and be quiet or leave the area.
Vos rose to his feet, hands on his hips as he glared across the circle.
This is not the time or the place to discuss it.
Seagroves stood open-mouthed. Vos had burst his bubble. His shoulders dropped, his lower lip hung down, his hands dropped to his sides. He was a pillar of disappointment. Standing there in the fading light, he looked like a man bearing the weight of the whole world on his shoulders. He turned from the group and slunk away. Vos scrambled to his feet and followed Pesht. Coming alongside the shambling Lamb pilot, he took him by the elbow and spoke softly.
You're right about the Lamb, of course. You know it, and I know it. But we don't want the others to get the idea. You're Lamb qualified, but don't forget that I am too. We understand the power it can give us. Think of it. A whole society ripe for the picking. Remember what that little guy said about the walls? Those walls are designed to keep out land vehicles. There are places you can go to see things like that. I've seen the pictures. With the mechs out, we can have it all. We can become boss man of the whole planet. It's not just us against the dest cruds. We don't need them at all, but we have to play our cards right. If they get the idea that we want to take over, they just might decide to destroy our mechs. That we cannot let happen. So, be a little more reserved. Cool down.
Yubari Takuda watched the two mech pilots merge with the deepening gloom. That they were scheming something was obvious, and any plan of theirs would surely not be in the best interests of him or his men. There was always the option of eliminating the mercenaries, one that remained viable as long as the Dest members maintained superior firepower. Until now, he'd rejected the idea because they needed their combined strength for the survival of all. The discovery of the other humans on the planet had changed the equation. The mercenaries were no longer so important to survival. But then again, neither was the Dest team. He was also certain that any other humans living on this world would consider the newly arrived humans a great asset. He didn't plan to make any moves until he had more information about the others, however. From what Dakota had said, there were 3 groups, or possibly more, living some distance away by the great river that flowed to the west. The Tatate was not sure how far distant they were, seeming to lack the grasp humans had on time or distance. The Tatate seemed to give the concept little importance. But somewhere to the west were the humans. Takuda knew they would have to make contact, but they would have to do it gently. There was no need to upset what sounded like an already delicate situation between the other humans. Meanwhile, Garber Vost had called the other mech pilots around him upon returning to the mercenary camp. They squatted in a tight group, the technicians standing behind in a reverential circle. His tone was conspiratorial.
"It's unbelievable," he whispered. "We have the whole planet in our hands. Nothing like this has ever happened before. We've got to make contact with the humans. With our firepower, we can rule everything. According to that furry little beast, the Enclaves have only the most primitive defenses. Like something from 1,000 years ago. They'll be a pushover."
"There may be too many of them," Pesh said, "and they may have weapons we don't know about. Even if they have to crawl across the ground to use them. There are some archaic weapons that could do a job on a mech." Vost was about to squash the little pilot, but thought better of it. Not only was Pesh valuable to him because he was the Javelin pilot, but he also had a point. There was no use charging into a situation that could be as fraught with danger as with possibility. But there had to be a way to profit from the situation. They were mercenaries, after all. That was the solution.
"Mercenaries," said Vost, thinking aloud. "That's it. That's what we can do. We'll sell our services to the highest bidder."
He sat back on his heels and chuckled. This called for decisive action. He stood up and put his hands on his hips, again hoping to impress the others with his air of command.
"We make contact," Bo said. "Show them what we can do, and then offer our services. We take the best offer. We can always change our minds if we want to."
He raised his fist in a victory salute.
"We can have it all."
He looked down at his followers.
"But we have to be careful," he continued in a softer voice. "Takuda and the rest of the Des team may not like our little plan. He thinks too much of himself, too much by half. We'll have to convince him that we're doing it his way, make him think it's all his idea. We'll have to get the mechs out of that dropship, and we can't do it as long as we got a guard there."
"We have slug pistols," said Collis Brank, looking up at his leader. "We could just do a job on 'em."
"Not a good plan, Brink. There are times when your mouth overloads your brain. How do you expect to get close enough to get them all on the first shot? Have you ever seen what a laser rifle can do to an unarmored human body? Or do you want to become a specimen yourself?"
He turned away from the seated pilot.
"No. We have to do it slowly. Just wait until we get those mechs out of the ship. And then we'll see who's boss."
Vost threw his head back and looked up at the first stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky.
"By the eyes of the dragon, this will be an adventure our children and our grandchildren will sing about."
In the quiet of the camp that night, Dakota rose from his nest. The stars twinkled in the sky overhead. There was hardly a breath of wind. With a stealthy softness born of instinct and much use, he stole silently from the camp.